We're officially 7 months plus into the Donald Trump administration, and we have 5 promises around real estate that we have been tracking. We are tracking his real estate-based promises and bills in Congress related to housing around Let's do it again. Around unaffordable. Unbiased, not unaffordable. It is unaffordable. We are 7 months into the Donald Trump administration, and we've been tracking his 5 real estate promises to make housing more affordable. To do so, we are tracking over 78 different variables with unbiased, unemotional, raw data through what we've called the Trump Tracker. But we're going to go through a couple articles today that showcase what's actually going on in today's market, starting with Zillow's change on price predictions. Zillow changes course on home pricing in over 400 markets, and we'll read here in the second paragraph that heading into 2025, Zillow's 12-month forecast for U.S. home prices was 2.6%. However, many housing markets across the country softened faster than expected, prompting Zillow to issue several downward revisions. By April 2025, Zillow cut its 12-month national price outlook to negative 1.7%. But as of recently, here in August, Zillow stopped issuing downward revisions, and this revised 12-month outlook is actually a 0.4% increase over prices, not what a lot of people want to hear. Into our next article, we have America's housing market reaching an inflection point. More specifically, an inflection report around new construction. We're going to walk through new construction, more specifically what we think is going to happen over the next 12 months with new construction and resale prices, and the likelihood of a home crash, a full housing crash. But this is an unusual turn of events because we now have newly built homes, normally more expensive than older properties, where previous owners might have lived in them for years. But now in the first quarter of this year, new homes cost $14,000 more than existing ones. While existing home prices have now been rising year over year for 7 straight quarters, according to data from the National Association of Home Builders, new home prices have begun falling steadily year over year for even longer. We are now up to 8 consecutive quarters with new construction homes sitting. But Trump definitely has an effect on this, and he wants to have an even stronger effect on this with rates. And that's our next article, because Donald Trump has made no secret that he wants rates to come down 100, 200, even 300 basis points. That's 3 full percentage points. And he plans to continue to pressure him even all the way up to his tomorrow's speech at Jackson Hole. He has stated that Jerome's actions as a central banker have been a disaster, and recently said, could someone please inform Jerome, too late Powell, that he is hurting the housing industry very badly. People can't get a mortgage because of him, Trump wrote. There is no inflation, and every sign is pointing to a major rate cut. Too late is a disaster. We actually have the Truth Social post pulled up. Got all the main points in here. People can't get a mortgage because of him. There is no inflation, and every sign is pointing to a major rate cut. Even though inflation is at 2.7 headline, and then without food and energy is at 3.1%. And we recently had the production price index come out a lot higher than what we anticipated. This is what wholesalers are paying. Lastly, we have seen a ring around the rosy game of the governors around the Federal Reserve getting pressure from the outside, starting with the Federal Reserve building and its budget going over budget for asbestos and parking, to a Fed governor actually leaving and being replaced with somebody who is pro-rate cut. But now we have Mr. Pulte calling out another member of the Federal Reserve Board, Mrs. Cook. He posted on social, not in an official interview or anything. We do a lot of things on socials. He says she has falsified bank documents and property records to acquire more favorable loan terms and potentially committing mortgage fraud under criminal statutes. Here's exactly what happened. Apparently, this board of governor from the Federal Reserve, Ms. Cook, took out a mortgage on a home in Michigan represented to be her principal residence where she's going to live. And shortly after, she took out a loan on a condo in Atlanta, Georgia, that was also described as the place she was going to be living. It further asserts that she listed the Atlanta condo as a rental property in 2022, despite having asserted in mortgage documents it would serve as her primary residence. That's a no-go. You're not allowed to do that. She hasn't defaulted on either loan, and President Trump in a post said, Cook must resign now. Has to do it right now. Do it now. There's 3 exclamation points. I'm assuming there was some Trump-like emphasis. So with all that being said, we have drama around the Fed and rates. There's a big meeting tomorrow. We will be live here on the YouTube channel tomorrow during that Federal Reserve speech at Jackson Hole. But today, we're going through the Trump tracker. The Trump tracker has been something we have been keeping up with now for over 7 months to track Donald Trump's promises against housing. The main scores that we're tracking are 4 main index scores. We have our overall housing health score, which sits at a 47.4. But if we were to scroll down and to the right, and you can scroll in this document as well, we have it linked in the description below, we'll see all 4 of the scores. A little over to the right, Sean. And that is monitored as our supply score, affordability score, and crash likelihood score. Supply has remained low really since COVID. We have not peaked over a score of 50 out of this total of potentially 100 points since then. Affordability. This is a score that we saw as high as 86 back in 2021 that has been on a steady decline ever since, now sitting at 38 out of 100. And our crash likelihood. People want to see this number go up for a more likely crash, possibly all the way up to 120. Could you highlight over crash likelihood real quick? If you put your cursor over where it says crash likelihood, it'll bring up the tiers right next to the 44.7. We'll see that 100 to 120 is what's considered a meltdown, but that a crash is really starting to become possible at 70. So as we sit at this 40 score, really not close, but we're going to walk through the exact numbers and how close we are to an actual housing crash. First, let's start with the cost of a home by going into our home cost metrics. Then we'll go into cost trackers to assign what the cost of all the items in a home are, the cost of living in a home. And then, of course, like I said, walk through what the next 12 months are going to look like with the potential of a housing crash. To start, resale homes are up $41,900 since the beginning of Donald Trump's term to $435,300. New construction is down $26,100 since the beginning of his term. This highlights the article that we just read saying that we are at a weird spot where now 8 consecutive quarters have gone by, 2 straight years have gone by, where new construction costs are indeed going down. Homes are sitting. And affordable homes, an affordable home defined as something from the National Association of Realtors, is defined as a $342,000 home. This is down $6,600 since the beginning. Can we take a quick water break? We're not going to mess up any more words throughout, but we are going to get into mortgage rates. One of the most popular and well-watched areas of the housing market is mortgages. We are down a 0.5 percentage point since the beginning of his term, starting at 7.07% as the 30-year conventional average to now 6.58. The Fed rate has dropped as well. Here we go. Presumably, as we're walking into fall, this is something that's presumably going to drop anywhere between 1/4 to 1/2 point, some even calling for a full point before the year end, but we have not seen any movement yet. Still no movement here yet. As soon as it updates, and we'll know immediately from the September meeting if it will, we will update in here. The 10-year Treasury yield down 0.23% since the beginning of his term. Core inflation, still something that we're tracking heavily. Sticky inflation is higher than headline inflation. Headline inflation sitting at 2.9. Less food and energy sitting at 3.1, but total sticky inflation sitting at 3.63%. Median mortgage per month, this is down $35 from the beginning of his term. Beginning of his term, it was sitting at $2,705. Now, if you were to walk into a home in America for the median home with taxes and insurance, you're only paying $2,670. So why don't you buy 2? The first-time homebuyer affordability index. These indexes are brought to us by NAR. This is a stark comparison that shows very clearly and obviously how different the world is for a first-time homebuyer versus a normal buyer. They separate the two First-time homebuyer affordability out of 100 is currently at a 67.9. This is 1.1 points higher than the beginning of the term, but this number has been in the 90s, even over 100 at times, showing a very affordable market for first-time buyers. They do this by taking the first-time homebuyer affordable income and the first-time homebuyer home and comparing the two together to see, can this person buy this home? As of today, the median income needed to buy an affordable home is about $99,000, and the median income of a first-time buyer is about $60,000. So you do the math. It's hardly affordable. But the overall composite housing affordability index, the next line, column 16, we see that it's at a 94.4. Now, this was at 100.7 at the beginning of Trump's term, meaning this number actually has gone down. That negative 6.26 should probably be red, not green. And this is a sign that even the normal home buyer is having a slightly harder time 7 months in than they did at the start in buying a home. Our median household income is still measured at $80,610 a year, though this number has not been updated by the Bureau of Labor and Statistics from the Census Bureau in over 13 months. We're going to drop down the total homes for sale. Supply is increasing with currently 1.1 million homes sitting on the market. This is 273,000 more than we started with, and a slightly higher velocity of the increase in supply than we've seen in prior years. We usually see an increase in spring and summer, but this was a slightly higher increase than normal. We need to see supply go high if we ever want to see prices die. New construction homes, though, are a large part of that inventory, with almost half of the total inventory being new construction homes that are sitting. This has a lot to do with the number we went over earlier, with new construction homes going down in price. More supply, price can die, homes are sitting. That's why new construction companies are slowly lowering their prices. Resale homes. 591,000 on the market. Just for some perspective, to get to a healthy housing market, we need this close to 2 million. This number is 258,000 units higher than where we got started. We're coming up on a near doubling of when we got the term started. But again, we're really far behind the 8 ball, and that's why we track building permits as well to see how many new homes are even being planned at the moment to be built. We want to see this number consistently every single month above 1.85 million, but this number has actually dropped now to 1.354 million. It disappeared for me for a second. We had 1.456 million. This is, again, a monthly number, and we want to see this monthly number back up closer to the 2 million mark. Let's get into how much it costs to live in a home with our housing cost tracker over to the right. We go back up to the top, and we're going to see all of the items that go into building a home and then living in a home. We are slowly expanding this section to include more items, but as of right now, we are tracking for building costs, softwood lumber, steel, shingles, plumbing, and concrete. And for household expenses, we're tracking power, milk, eggs, bread, boneless chicken, we don't need no bones, gallon of gas, home insurance, car insurance. Back up to the top, we'll start with softwood lumber. Softwood lumber has dropped in price ever so slightly, $6.17. Steel, up in price, up $11.65. Shingles, up slightly to $359. That's a $3.99 increase. Plumbing, up from $421 to $445. This is a $24.47 increase. And concrete has remained remarkably stable, even dropping ever so slightly by 77 cents. That's the cost of building a home. Not seeing a lot of increase there, but slight increases. Now let's talk about your costs. Your cost of living in a home, power, only up 0.01% according to the Federal Reserve, which has been really criticized for possibly not actually marking the real inflation and power costs. Many people saying their bills are hundreds of dollars higher. Milk. Gallon of milk is 13 cents more than it was at the beginning of the term 7 months ago. Eggs down nearly 25%. $1.35 down, peaked at about $7 in March. Bread down 8 cents, down to $1.85 for a 12-slice white bread loaf. Boneless chicken. Not sure about boned chicken, but boneless chicken is up 23 cents. Gallon of gas up 2 cents to $3.23 nationally. And this is one where Donald Trump has said multiple times that gas nationally is below $2 and getting closer to $1.70, $1.80. Not something we're seeing in any numbers. Home insurance up $4.27 for a yearly premium, and car insurance, monthly premium, annualized, that would be about a $25 increase. And car insurance, an annualized increase of about $50 and a $3.89 increase in that monthly premium. Let's move over to the potential of a housing crash. Now, of course, we are going to be expanding this section. We'll show you real quick. We're going to be tracking beef, crude oil, doors, HVAC, fridge, etc. to know the real picture of affordability for the normal American in America. Let's go over to the left-hand side. Let's check these housing crash metrics. This is what many people want. Many people want to see home prices drop. And the only way, all the way at the bottom, we're going to see that happen is if we see some form of crash or downward pressure on pricing. Now, you may be thinking, Zach, when was the last time housing actually dropped in cost by more than 10%? Do you know? Couple of you may. You may have said, 2008, Zach, I'm no dummy. And you're right. From the first quarter of 2006 to the third quarter of 2008, home prices would drop 21% nationally. Now check this. The other time that it happened, because it only happened one other time before 2006 to 2008, was 1931. So we have two different times in American real estate history where home costs have dropped more than 10%, sometimes 20%, but it's only happened twice. And so what we did is we took the historical elements that led to those home price pressures happening, pressuring them down 10 to 20%, and we said, okay, what metrics would have to be met today with our increased population, increased housing count? What would we have to see happen to see a housing crash? And we put it into a formula. And this formula is measuring 15 different variables, which you can see over here on the left, from 32 down to 46. Everything from jobs, temporary hiring, credit cards, foreclosures, disposable income, delinquency rates, car payments, and even the backdated yield curve, my personal favorite. And all of these items together create a point system that allow us to know when the next crash is going to happen. Now, as of right now, we are not tracking any potential crash in the near future. Next 6 months looks pretty clean. But I'm going to tell you the three items in this list that we need to watch carefully because they're starting to take in a direction that could lead toward crash. Let's start with unemployment. Can we click on that real quick? Bring up the U3 unemployment. Now, if we can click on year up there in the top right, 1 year. Perfect. Now, what we're going to see here is the U3 unemployment rate. If you don't know what the U3 unemployment rate, this is the typical unemployment rate that's used for headlines. It's balanced between 4.0 and 4.2 for the last 12 months and currently sits at 4.2. There are estimates that this will peak up to about 4.3 in the next month. But you may be saying to yourself, Zach, over the last 12 months, I feel like the housing market the job market hasn't been that good. And there may be some argument for what you're saying because this unemployment rate isn't actually the best way of doing it. So could you bring me to 1 real quick? If you were to actually look at unemployment via the U3 unemployment rate, you would see this 4.2 number, but do you know how they get it? The way that they get this number is by calling people. They get on the phone, the BLS does, Bureau of Labor and Statistics, all their people, all their economists and data trackers, get on the phone with 40,000 households and ask them, are you employed? How much do you make? What about little Johnny? Is he employed? Is he looking for a job? Okay, great. Thank you for taking the time to take this 25-minute voluntary survey. Thank you for having enough time, wherewithal, and mental health to be able to sit here and take this survey that you don't have to take. I know you got to make dinner for your 4 kids and you got to go to your second job to support it because your husband had left you, but I know you're going to fill out this survey and do it with accurate information. The problem is You're probably not getting accurate information. The problem is we're getting so much information implementation from the BLS that is showing that we aren't getting the accurate data. We're getting job creation reports that are abysmal. We're getting job loss reports and layoff reports that are starting to pick up. We're getting reports quarterly from GM and Ford of $2 billion losses. We're going to start seeing this number go up. We're starting to see it in the JOLTS report. We're starting to see it in U6. We already see it in underemployment and especially employment of those graduating college. So the job market is not nearly as strong as maybe this number projects, but is one of the key numbers that we need to watch. Let's go back into the Trump tracker and let's go into number 2 that we need to be watching like a hawk. Can we see the screen, Sean? Cool. The number one thing that we need to track is unemployment, because in 1931 and in 2008, one of the leading indicators that caused price suppression was supply increase from those needing to sell their home. They couldn't keep it, couldn't afford it, needed to sell it. I got to sell it for whatever I can get for it because we can't afford this mortgage anymore, leading to price suppression. Wages being suppressed starts price suppression in housing. So we also need to look at supply. Number 4, total housing supply. Let's click on that one. Total housing supply is the number 2 item we need to track, because in order for a price to die, supply has to be high. We have to have such a high amount of supply in connection to the demand that leads to prices coming down. How does this happen? It happens because if we get 10 people that want to buy one home, the price is going to go up on that one home because we're going to get a bidding war. We're going to get multiple offers. They're going to go over asking. But if we have 10 homes and one person that's qualified to buy it, now all these sellers got to compete for the buyer's business. And they're going to give better terms, better negotiating, and they're going to give better pricing to the buyer. So today, in the last year, we can see that this has slowly started to go up. And actually, as I mentioned earlier, at a higher velocity than prior springs. If we could hit the 10-year on this graph real quick, Sean, we'll see we get this seasonality wave that happens every single year. We go in the winter, we lose inventory. We go into summer, we pick up inventory. And that velocity is very common every single year. But the velocity was a bit stronger this year. And there's a higher likelihood that we aren't going to experience as far as a dip into winter, maybe sticking in or around this million range. But we need this number to get closer to 3.5 to 4 million before we ever start talking about home crash. So if you want housing prices to drop, you need to be cheering this number all the way to the top. Let's go to number 3 in the numbers that we need to be watching. If we scroll down, I want us to walk into one that, to be honest with you, you may not get at first, but let me explain it to you. Let's go to this backdated yield curve. It's one of our 5 critical variables that we're tracking. And if you're unaware of what this document is or what this number is, let me explain it to you. Can we hit max on the graph up there? Perfect. So this is going to be a quick little crash course on the yield curve. So every time we see this blue line go below the black line, what do we see that happens next? We see right here that in 1978 to 1979 and then onward through to 81, we saw the yield curve invert below this black line. Then we see that gray section happen. What's the gray section? That gray section that happened right there in the beginning of the 80s is a recession. Let's go forward again. If we go up to about 81 into 82, we see another yield curve inversion followed by gray, followed by our recession. Let's go back up into the late 80s, into the 90s. We see once again the yield curve inverts slightly, and then we have slight recession. So there's a pattern. It inverts, it starts to pattern back up, recession. It inverts, it starts to pattern back up, recession. We see it happened in the dot-com bubble, 2000. Let's back up real quick to the 2000 dot-com bubble. It inverts, then it starts to peak up, and then gray recession. Look at 2008. Inverts, then it starts to go up. See that little spot where it starts to go up before it hits recession? Right there. See where it starts to re-invert out of this inversion? And then we hit the recession. So we can see historically that how long and how deep the inversion is a direct reflection for how long and how detrimental usually the recession is. If we look at 2020, we saw the quickest inversion and the quickest of recessions, thanks to a lot of money printing. But now, let's look at 2022 to 23. And let's look at not only how long, but how deep and consistent we saw. Yeah, starting from right there, from the summer of 2022 on, all the way through 2022, through 2023, through 2024, the yield curve was inverted. And let's bring this back to Max. Look for another time where it inverted that long and that deep. It hasn't. This has led many different economists to think, are we in the midst of one of two things? One, are we in the midst of realizing this yield curve inversion thing really isn't that big a deal? The difference between our 2-year yield and our 10-year yield, not that big a deal. It's been merely a coincidence that's led to recession. Or number two, we are currently sitting in the eye of the storm. We're sitting in the calm on the shore, awaiting one of the biggest potential crashes and recessions we've ever seen, because we've just gotten out of one of the longest, most aggressive, most consistent yield curve inversions we've ever had. So if you look at the numbers and you look at this graph, you can imagine a world where option number 2 is real. But there's also a world where number 1 could be real. And we're just going to make our way out of it. What do you think? Those are the 3 numbers on the housing affordability crash tracker, though, that I want you to keep closest eye to. Are people keeping their jobs? Is housing supply going up or down? And have we seen any more action or recovery from the yield curve? With all that being said, we can see that home costs, or the cost of getting into a home, are continuing to go up throughout the 7 months of his term. We also see that the cost of building a home isn't going down, where rates for a mortgage are staying in or around the mid-6s to high 6s, and the cost of new construction really being the only thing that's getting any downward pressure, and a lot of that has to do with the increase in new construction supply. So let me ask you, do you believe that Donald Trump is currently making good on his 5 promises for housing? His main 5 promises: to make housing more affordable, to bring a higher supply of homes to America, to cut regulatory costs so that builders can build more homes, to cut mortgage rates, and to support and supply the first-time home buyer with ways to get in on this market. As of right now, we have 206 executive orders signed, none of them having to do with housing, and our housing health score hovering around the high to mid-40s, making no real moves in the last 7 months. Supply slightly going up, affordability staying at a point where it is nearly unaffordable for everybody, and unfortunately for those cheering for it, a crash is nowhere close. Our Trump housing affordability tracker will continue to be a quarterly and monthly update that we give to you here on YouTube, as well as over on TikTok and Instagram, to keep you up to date with real, authentic, and unbiased data to know whether or not Trump is making good on his promises to make housing more affordable again for you and I.